On November 5, 2024, Clark County voters will have their say on who they want to serve as U.S. President, as well as a number of high-profile federal, state, and local races. Recently, we sat down with Clark County Auditor Greg Kimsey, who has served in the elected role since 1999, to talk about the upcoming election and learn how his office helps ensure fair and accurate vote counts.
Hello, I'm Jim Demmer with Clark County Close-Up. Thank you so much for meeting with us, Greg.
You're very welcome, Jim. I appreciate being invited.
Sure. So Greg, as County Auditor, what's your role in relation to Clark County elections?
Well, the County Auditor, in the state of Washington, the County Auditor, or in 38 of the 39 states, the County Auditor is responsible for conducting all public elections and also registering people to vote and then maintaining the voter registration database. In that 39th county, King County, that responsibility is carried out by an elected elections director.
Okay. So presidential elections always bring out more voters. Do you have an estimate on the percentage of voters who will be voting in November?
Well, we do. As you say, it's an estimate. It's just kind of an educated guess. But looking at prior presidential elections, we think it'll be 85%, maybe even a little higher than that.
So how many ballots roughly is that?
Well, so we also see a pretty big increase in the number of registered voters between the primary and the general election in presidential years. So we had 338,000 registered voters for this year's primary. We, in the past, have seen about a 7% increase in that number, so we could be up to, I think it's around 360,000 registered voters in this year's general election, which, do the math, 85% of that is 307 or
so a lot,
20,
a lot of ballots.
A very large number.
A large amount of ballots.
A very large number. In thinking about that, I did a little math to look back in history. In 2004, we had about 170,000 people turn in their ballot for the presidential election year, in the presidential general election. So you can see Clark County's voter registration database, the number of registered voters in Clark County has increased dramatically over those 20 years. Which is, you might be aware, we're dramatically increasing the work area in the elections office, and that's driven by the increase in the number of registered voters.
Okay, so that's one of my questions. How have you been preparing for this increase in the number of ballots?
Well, unfortunately, the increase in the work area, we didn't hit this year's presidential election. It's going to be not available to us until next year. But we have a large number of experienced seasonal election workers that we bring in for every election. And for this presidential election, we've increased the number of folks we're bringing in as seasonal workers. We'll have probably 150 people plus as seasonal workers that come in and help us with all that manual work that's involved in processing ballots and tabulating ballots.
Okay, so if someone isn't registered to vote, how do they register and what are the deadlines?
So it's easy to register to vote. If someone has access to the internet, you can and have a driver's license or now a social security number, or a Washington ID card. You can register online at votewa.gov. And I believe the deadline to you can also print out a paper form or get a paper form and mail that to us. And I believe the deadline for that online registration or mail registration is October 28th.
Oh, wow.
And then after that, you can still register to vote and get a ballot for this general election, but you can have to do it in person at the elections office. And then you can do that up until, including 8 o'clock p.m. election day. You can register in person, get a ballot for this general election up until 8 o'clock p.m. election day, in person at the elections office.
Okay. When should people expect their ballots to arrive in the mail?
So they'll be given to the post office on October 18th, and then be arriving at people's mail October 19th, 20th. But really, if that following week, week of October 21 is when everyone should get their ballot. If people people have not received their ballot by the end of that week, say Thursday of October, the week of October 21, they should contact the elections office, and then we'll help them get a ballot.
Great. Speaking of ballots, I noticed in the primary, the format of the ballots were changed. What are some of the changes, and was this for Clark County only? Was it for the entire state? Can you explain the differences?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. No, now Clark County is one of the, I believe, 7 very large counties in the state that all have the same ballot format. King County, Snohomish County, Pierce County, Spokane County. Something like 90% of the voters in the state of Washington receive the same type of ballot package that Clark County is now producing. We made this change for a number of reasons. There's some benefits to voters. First, voters will, I think, see on their instructions, there's a listing of the 3 closest ballot drop boxes to each voter's location. So wherever you are, wherever you're residing in the county, on your instructions, you'll see a listing of the 3 ballot drop boxes that are closest to you. We also had a problem with our old ballot format where voters would vote their ballot, they'd give it to the post office, and for a very, admittedly, a very small number, but every election there'd be a small number of voters where they gave their ballot, voted ballot to the post office, and the post office returned it back to the voter. And then, sometimes we wouldn't hear from the voter until after election day, and so just a really unfortunate situation. And then also, with our old ballot package system, previously we were working with 5 different vendors to get all the pieces put together and all the timings and materials in order or in inventory, each of the vendors to produce those ballot packages. With this, we have a single vendor, kind of one-stop shopping. It's a much less complex process for us, and that reduced complexity really fundamentally reduces the likelihood of an error happening, of missing a deadline. So that simplicity of the process is another good reason why we made that change.
Okay. So what's the voting deadline? And you mentioned also how people can drop their ballots off.
Yeah, so the voting deadline is election day, November 5th. You have to have your ballot in a ballot drop box by November 5th, and I'll take the opportunity to encourage voters to use ballot drop boxes. The post office does a pretty good job, but we'll say every election we receive a ballot or 2, or maybe more than 2, that were properly postmarked election day earlier, but are returned to us. We receive them at the elections office after we certify the election. Oh. And so, again, the post office does a good job, but if you take your ballot to a ballot drop box, you can be 100% assured your ballot's going to be received by the elections office and is going to be processed. So November 5th is election day, 8:00 p.m. in a ballot drop box, or if you do choose to use the post office, it has to be postmarked election day or earlier. So we really encourage folks to, if they're going to use the post office, get it to the post office a day or 2 before election day. If you take it to the post office on election day, take it inside and have a postal clerk hand stamp that so you do get election day postmark on it.
Great. This question comes from my wife.
Always a good source.
Always a good source. So if you vote, is it recorded how you vote anywhere?
No.
An individual, so no. It's not recorded.
How you vote is absolutely not known to anyone. Very early in the process, any identification of the individual voter and the actual ballot is separated. And from that point forward, there is no connection between the voter and the ballot. Now, what is known, though, is whether or not you did vote. And so every registered voter's voting record is public information, but how you voted is absolutely not known to anyone.
Okay. So the 2020 presidential race was very controversial, as you know, with people claiming election tampering. Can you give a brief overview of the number of steps you take to ensure the elections are secure and all the ballots are counted?
Well, brief, I don't know, Jim, but let me give it a try. I'll give it a try. So it starts with the integrity of the people who administer the election. People who work in elections understand the importance of the work they do. They understand that we serve as part of the foundation of our democracy. Beyond that, the hardware and software that we use has been certified, tested and certified by the federal government and the Secretary of State's office. For every election, we run tests to ensure that the software we're using is the exact same software that was certified. That software and hardware is kept in a secure room, in a secure office, in a secure building, in a room that has you can't have more than you have to have at least 2 people in the room at any time. We run an audit of after election day. We run an audit of the voting system and hardware to ensure that it's performing as expected.
And the hardware is not connected to the internet.
Thank you.
Okay.
Software and hardware has no communication capabilities to connect to the internet.
So someone couldn't hack in. Okay.
We actually our hardware is kept in these steel cages. No one can get access to the computers, even if they get inside the room. We conduct a logic and accuracy test in advance to ensure the election is properly programmed and that the ballots are being counted properly. A really very important part of the process also is we have observers from the League of Women Voters, the Democratic Party, and also the Republican Party. These are people who have gone through the training to be certified as observers. So yeah, there's a number of steps we take to ensure that the integrity of the process is very, very high, that people should have confidence in the accuracy of the results.
And to me, just most recently, you had a good example of that. I believe you had a state race where the state required a hand recount. Could you explain what difference between what your report was and the hand recount?
Sure. Yeah, and it's a recount is actually it's a lot of work for election administrators, but it's also, I think, a very healthy exercise to go through once in a while. And just a small correction, it's not that the state required us to do that, it's that the results of the race were close enough that state law required us to do a manual recount. So yeah, we recounted almost 397,000 ballots in the Public Lands Commissioner race. It ended up adding 1 additional vote for 1 candidate. There were 7 ballots in total where, after humans looked at those ballots more closely, it was determined that the recorded votes needed to be changed. But again, the net result was +1 for 1 candidate. So as every other recount in the history of Clark County, the original results were confirmed. And really, again, as every recount has shown in Clark County, what it shows is humans make mistakes, or humans don't follow instructions always, but software and hardware does not make mistakes. Software and hardware worked perfect.
For tight races, either locally or nationally, it can take time to determine the winner. Why does it take so long, as opposed to finding out that night, election night?
Sure. Well, for most races, you can say with a very high level of confidence who the ultimate winner is going to be. For a very, very, very close race, like the Public Lands Commissioner race, yeah, you won't know. You're not able to predict the results until it's certified, basically. Very close to certification. When you have 51 vote differential in a statewide race, you're not going to ever know the difference, the outcome, until it's actually certified and then recounted, as we just did. But the distinctive feature of a vote by mail election versus a polling place election is that every one of those ballots are returned. You have to verify the signature on each of those ballots before the ballot package can be put forward for inspection, scanning, and tabulation. And that ballot signature verification process takes humans and takes some time. So we receive a large number of ballots from ballot drop boxes after 8 o'clock p.m. election night. We receive a large number of ballots in the mail the next morning, Wednesday morning. All those ballots have to go through the signature verification process. And they can't be processed until they have had that signature verification process. So it kind of gets to 3 categories. Most races you can predict the results election night. The vast majority of any other races you can predict by that following Friday. And then there are the outliers, like the Public Lands Commissioner race with 51 vote differential, that you really have to wait until it's certified.
So the earlier you get your ballot in, that would mean it would be counted by election night.
If every voter in Clark County returned the ballot the moment they received it, we would have, you could, with a very high level of confidence, you could predict the results election night. However, that's not human nature.
Right.
And so, but yeah, the earlier people vote, the more votes we receive, the earlier we receive votes, the more votes we can include in those preliminary election results election night. Absolutely.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our viewers?
Well, voters should have a high level of confidence in the integrity and the accuracy of election results here in Clark County and across the state of Washington. I think, again, as that recount just demonstrated, the election process here in Clark County produces very, very accurate results. I guess finally, if anyone with concerns or questions about the elections administration process here in Clark County, I encourage them to call me.
Great. Well, thank you so. And I just want to say the website is clark.wa.gov/elections.
Or clarkvotes.org, whichever is easier for you. clarkvotes.org.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.